Yeah. That's too much background. I know. Okay, yeah. Okay. But we have to. This would won't be. Well, you can ask their no. She said, yeah, so. Every time we now you can use that. Yes. Yeah, I can hear, but if you want to sit there. It's easiest to do your vote. Yeah, wherever you're, yeah, that goes too far.
Right.
This is when I go back to state health to do it, this is what they see on the screen. Is the camera is there. I know.
I know this. It was okay when I was.
So
we.
Yeah, that's very normal. Yeah.
Afternoon, we were just waiting to make sure we had a forum, and now we have another forum, so we're gonna be able to get started. Thank you for all being here, September meeting. I'm gonna call it to order and ask our interpreter to come and give us some instructions.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ricardo Garcia. I'm along with Gladys Ramos. I'm going to be the interpreter for this meeting. Instruction to access the interpreter via Zoom on your computer. After the host activates language interpretation mode, click the interpretation icon and select the language that you would like to hear. English and Spanish interpretation is available. Optional to only hear the interpreted language, click the original audio. Via phone, in your media controls, tap more at the bottom right in the mobile phone app and top right in the tablet app after the host activates language interpretation mode. Select language interpretation and click the language that you would like to hear. If the icon is not visible, tap the screen to make it appear. Reminder, speak slowly, pause between sentences, speak clearly, avoid interrupting or multiple people speaking, avoid using metaphors, acronyms, slang, or idioms. Interpretaciones during the meeting, speak slower, raise your voice, interrupt for clarification or communicate a concern. Acceso al intérprete a través de Zoom por computadora. Después de que el anfitrión active el modo de interpretación del lenguaje, haga clic en el símbolo de interpretación y seleccione el idioma que desea escuchar. Interpretación en inglés y en español están disponibles. Opcional, para solo escuchar el idioma interpretado, haga clic en omitir audio original. A través del teléfono, en los controles de la reunión oprima la opción más después de que el anfitrión active el modo de interpretación del lenguaje. Esta opción estará localizada en la parte inferior a la derecha de la aplicación en su teléfono y en la parte superior a la derecha de la aplicación en su tableta. Una vez ahí, seleccione interpretación del lenguaje y elija el idioma que desea escuchar. Interpretación en inglés y en español están disponibles. Si el símbolo no está visible, toque la pantalla para que aparezca. Recordatorio, hable despacio, pause entre oraciones, hable con claridad, evite interrumpir o varias personas hablar entre sí. Evite usar metáforas, siglas, doble sentido o modismo. Señales del intérprete durante la junta, hable despacio, hace la voz, interrumpir para clarificación o para comunicar algún problema. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with introductions and we have a new member. Welcome, Chris Ridge. Thank you for being here. And if you'd like to just maybe say a couple words about yourself and what district you're representing, and then we'll go from there around to all of us to do the same thing.
Thank you, and my name is Chris Ridge, and I'm representing District Two. And I serve as the educational representative here. I'm an employee of the Ventura County Office of Education. And I'm delighted at the appointment to be here and serve in this capacity. Thank you.
Soledad.
Good afternoon, my name is Soledad Barragán and represent District 5 and member of community.
Hi, Dalia Robkin, District 4, and I'm a mental health provider.
Good afternoon, Michael Rodriguez, I'm the Chief Deputy Public Defender, District 5.
Sergeant Chris Dowd, the Ventura County Sheriff's Office, Custody Division.
Hi, my name is John Stencil. I'm a behavioral health consultant and I'm representing District 1.
Good afternoon, Andre Wabro. I am appointed by Matt Levere and I am pediatric hospitalist at the Ventura County Medical Center. And I'm also the second
Vice Chair.
vice chair. Thank you.
You're not getting out of it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Matt Levere, representing the Board of Supervisors.
Good afternoon, Naomi Marupo, District 3. I also work with Spirit of Santa Paula.
Sally Garcia, Secretary, District 3.
I'm Diane McKay, area District 2, and I am the first vice chair.
And I'm Cheryl Heitman, I'm the chair of the board representing District 1.
Hi, Loretta Denner, behavioral health director.
Okay, thank you. We do have, as I said, a quorum, more than a quorum. We have a couple people who aren't able to be here, and we are gonna try to make this room smaller because it just feels so far away. So we're working on how to kind of try to reorganize it. We have the howl, that's the way we can show it online, which hopefully will also be improved soon. But anyway, so we're gonna try to do that because it just feels just too far away for me. Okay, so moving along to, there's no just cause, right? So you can just not, okay, so you don't want, okay. So approval of the agenda, you did receive the agenda in your packet. Is there any, are there any changes? Any corrections?
Yes, could we switch in order, items 9 and 10? So the presentation, to precede the approval of the bylaws?
Okay, so, okay, would like to make a motion to do that? To switch it? Okay, and you are the bylaws committee chair.
Yes.
Yes, the reason I put that high up on the agenda was simply because I wanted to make sure we had enough people here to vote on it, because it's been kind of languishing, as you well know. So, but since we have more than a quorum, it should be okay to do that. That's the body, that's the wish of the body. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. This has to be a roll call vote, Sylvia, sorry. You're moving a second, that we're changing the agenda, just moving around those two items.
Soledad Barragán,
Yes.
Danielle Benoit. Andrew Wabro,
Yes.
Nancy Orchard,
That's a. Daniel Paul with it, yes, a work emergency.
Jeffrey Davis. Chris Dyer,
Yes.
Genevieve Flores,
It's gonna be late.
myself, Sue Garcia, yes. Rebecca Gregorian,
She's still.
Chris Ridge,
Yes.
Supervisor Matt Lavere,
Yes.
Nomi,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Ron Senzel,
Yes.
Talia Rockin,
Yes.
Michael Rodriguez,
Yes.
Marlon Torres,
Not here.
and Sherman.
Yes, that motion passes. Thank you, so we'll make that change, I hope.
Thank you.
Approval of the minutes, again, if you, even if you weren't here, if you've read them, you may still vote on this. So is there a motion to either correct or approve?
I move approval of minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Been moved in second on, any discussion? And Sylvia, if you can take the roll again.
Soledad, Aragon,
Yes.
you know, people that aren't here,
No, just to skip those.
and then, Chris Dyer,
Yes.
myself, yes. Rebecca Gregorian,
Yes.
no. Chris Rich,
I'll abstain, I wasn't here.
Supervisor Matt Lavere,
Yes.
Nomi,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
John Senzel,
Yes.
Talia Rockin,
Same.
Michael Rodriguez,
Yes.
and Sherman.
Yes, motion passes, thank you. We are now going to go to public comments. Any member of the public who would to speak to us, you have 3 minutes, if you're in the room, yeah, come on up. And I don't know if there's anybody, I don't see any hands up there, but if I'm missing somebody, there's sort of a glare, somebody let me know if I'm missing somebody up there.
Your time.
I'll tell you 30 seconds. if you want.
Okay. Can everybody hear me? We just have a completely failed mental health care system.
Just introduce yourself first, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. My name is Scott Miller. I'm creating first of its kind, a 24-hour mental health ER, pharmaceutical free, an ambulance service, and a supplemental mental health insurance, which will be at as low as cost of $33 a month. I'm really frustrated. I've been studying our mental health care system for about 12, 13 years, and I see all the flaws, and I've come up with all the solutions. I can say that with 100% confidence. Everyone's mental health right now is being challenged by our dictator president. Pharmaceuticals almost killed my son about 10 years ago. He was in the ER, he was prescribed a drug called Focalin. He had to get morphine injections, and it's really traumatic. And then I've suffered with mental health issues, to come to find out from head injuries. I have a copy of a Danish study looking forward to, but if you have a head injury, it can take 8 to 9 years for mental illness to show up. This is a study of 100,000 people over 10 years. And our whole system does not treat head injuries. I could have platinum, triple diamond medical insurance. I'm not going to be getting any of the therapies. I personally pay out of my pocket. This is really important. 53% of all homeless people have a traumatic brain injury. You can Google traumatic brain injury, homeless, you'll get 4 or 5 studies. The Google one gives you 53%. We are failing. It's really sad. The system is so broken. And I'm happy to say I have solutions. And I really need everybody to really take a hard look at this document, 1 page, get on my emailing list,
I'm reaching out to a lot of people. The money's there. I just spent a few months doing a course down in Los Angeles. There's $150 billion available in Los Angeles as the Olympics, the World Cup, and the Super Bowl's coming. And so I have no doubt in a matter of time, I will have plenty of money, have a 24-hour mental health, pharmaceutical-free ER. Yeah, I'm a bit frustrated. Been watching, people, I have friends lose their kids to suicide, my friends lose their kids to fentanyl. And I have just one piece of paper I'd like to give to everybody. And that's it. Again, my name is Scott Miller. This is all the information on one piece of paper. I highly recommend people send me an email so I can send you information as it happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here.
Sure.
Yes, Rob, yes. Oh, thanks.
Lieutenant Gardner, family member, former member of this BHAB, also a member. Now that this board has changed the bylaws, that's a good thing, and moved all of the standing committees, that's fine. I would urge the chair to appoint someone to start an adult services work. There are many, many things happening in the adult system of care. Lots of things being built, lots of things happening. And I would urge this board also to encourage non-board members and outside family members like me to be part of that work. So that's a comment for today. Thank you. You got the good work.
Thank you. Anybody, any other public comments, of anybody in the room? And anybody on Zoom? I don't see any hands. Okay, we'll have another opportunity if we think of something later. Okay, we'll move along then. We're going to now move into our presentation and I guess Courtney, you're gonna introduce the presentation as well as the people speaking and such, right? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Courtney Bluebell and I'm the Mental Health Services Act, or MHSA, soon to be Behavioral Health Services Act, BHSA manager. So as you know, or many of you already know, Proposition 1 was passed by voters in 2024, March of 2024. And MHSA is typically or has typically been referred to as the millionaire's tax, which, as you can probably surmise, means that it's a volatile funding source. I mean, some years there are more millionaires and sometimes there are less. Since the passage of Proposition 1, all 58 counties and 2 cities who receive MHSA funding have been focused on understanding and working to implement the changes under Proposition 1, which go live July 1st, 2026. One of the biggest things is that this is a major transition of a 21-year-old system that is funded under MHSA. So the shift from MHSA, Mental Health Services Act, to Behavioral Health Services Act is a significant and complex one. So to help us with the complexity of these system changes, we have partnered with Health Management Associates, HMA, who is a national healthcare consultancy, to assist us with this transformation and transition into BHSA and with the community planning process, or the CPP. So you'll see that acronym out in the world too, right? Community planning process / CPP. So the way that today is going to be structured is that our HMA colleague is Nick Williams is going to start with basically a high-level overview. So it'll be a reminder to those of you who are familiar with what we've already brought to the board for under Proposition 1. And for the new members, this will be sort of a learning for you to see what lives inside Proposition 1 at a high level. So the high level orientation to what is Proposition 1 and what are we looking at? And then following Nick Williams's presentation, after an opportunity for the board to comment and for the public to comment, we will then go into a more detailed, for a brief period of time, into housing interventions,
full service partnerships or wraparound care, and behavioral health services and supports, which are the three major areas under Proposition 1, which are being a part of the whole transformation. So then we'll go into more detail, and that will be led by our HMA colleague, Michael Butler. So those two individuals will come up here shortly. And I want to remind you, which they will also remind you, that we will be holding, in addition to today, in addition to key informant interviews and in-reach presentations, we are conducting 5 community planning town halls, 2 on Zoom and 3 in person throughout the county. At the, for those of you who are in person, the flyer indicating the addresses, dates, and times is available in hard copy. You also have it in your packet. And for those of you who are on Zoom, you receive the electronic version of these flyers as well. So we really, really hope that you will come out. These are opportunities for you to bring your voice to this community planning process, to help engage in, basically offering your priorities and solutions to help inform our integrated plan. The integrated plan is a requirement that is a new requirement under Proposition 1 that we will be submitting to the state in 2026. And so it's important that we make sure that we're integrating as many voices and input as we can in that process. So without much further to say, I would like us to welcome Nick Williams up, who's going to speak about Proposition 1, again, giving you a high-level orientation. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney, for putting this together too. And before you start, just so to remind members, this was sent to you in your packet, the presentation, so you can follow along the slides if you choose.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Nick Williams, as Courtney mentioned, and I'm here with Health Management Associates. We're a national management consulting firm that supports counties, communities, and states with a variety of health-related projects, mostly tied to federal Medicaid and social safety net programs. I'm joined by my colleague, Michael Butler, who's going to lead some of the discussion orientation here. I'm going to do the overview, and Gabriel Velasquez. The three of us are just down the 101 short ways in Los Angeles, and our experience and expertise is really in gathering community input and helping to kind of put the pieces together to understand, where those particular priorities might be as it relates to policies and behavioral health policy in particular. So we're here today really in partnership with the Ventura County Behavioral Health Department as part of the community planning process, or CPP, as Courtney alluded to, and specifically under the auspices of the Behavioral Health Services Act, for BHSA. So while some of you may be familiar with the BHAB, we are going to kind of present the information today. In the same way, we're going to share it with the virtual town halls or the community town halls and the in-reach events that we're doing. The first virtual town hall is tomorrow evening, where we'll have ample time to kind of get more into some discussion. They're a little bit longer as well. I also know there's a number of folks who aren't part of the BHAB that are in the room today too. So we want to make sure everyone's kind of operating off the same set of assumptions and understanding. So the first real level set is one that Courtney just mentioned, and that is that the Behavioral Health Services Act really represents a pretty significant shift in how state funding can be used to support county behavioral health services. And the second thing is that meetings like this are really an opportunity to help shape and provide input into the Ventura County's integrated plan, which is required by Ventura County to submit next year. And that will kind of serve as a roadmap for the next 3 years of funding of BHSA. I think Courtney kind of touched on this, but we're kind of, again, just here on behalf of Ventura County Behavioral Health to help unpack some of that complexity and really be a neutral voice to gather information, inclusive of the town hall events, the surveys, the other information that you provide today. So we're really just here to listen and help the county behavioral health department also understand all of these changes that are happening pretty rapidly at the same time in a period of that's, quite dynamic, just with the state and federal landscape. So the behavioral health board itself will have other opportunities to provide input in a formal kind of comment period that will take place on the integrated plan next year. But today is really an opportunity to hear from you and to help shape kind of what those priority investments might look like moving forward. So let me just move on in my slides here. Let's see. We're gonna. Maybe if you could advance it, that would be great.
It looks like the forward is in.
Thank you so much. If you could just go forward one slide. Thank you. So actually, could you go back a slide? I think we're.
I think we're up to,
There we go, perfect, okay, so just very quickly, we've already kind of established this, but we're gonna just try to get grounded. In Proposition 1 and BHSA, which sometimes people use the BHSA and Proposition 1 interchangeably. In reality, BHSA is one part of Proposition 1, which we'll talk about. We're also gonna just go over some of the statewide goals and priorities that are driving the transformation, and a little bit more about the integrated plans that the county has to submit. Then we're going to move into some discussion. We're happy to answer questions at that point, either about the policy of BHSA, kind of you're making sure you all understand it, as well as some really discussion-oriented questions that are designed to get your feedback and input early on. And then we're going to wrap up and just give you an orientation to the survey and how to complete that. Next slide, please. Sorry, forward. I'm so sorry, go back. Go back, thank you so much, okay. I'm just gonna start here by just a quick level set, which is, again, sometimes we talk about Proposition 1, and you'll hear people say behavioral health transformation as part of, from the state's perspective, Proposition 1 really is a cornerstone of behavioral health transformation. But there are lots of other acronyms that you may have heard over the past 18 months. There's CalAIM, BH Connect, the CARE Act 988, and others. You don't have to kind of know the ins and outs of any of those for today's presentation. We're really focused in on Proposition 1, which is the Behavioral Health Services Act, or BHSA, or sorry, one particular part is the BHSA. Next slide, please. So Proposition 1 passed in March of 2024, and it needed to change a prior proposition passed in 2004, which Courtney had mentioned, known as the Mental Health Services Act, or MHSA, which placed a tax on incomes over $1 million to create a dedicated source of funding for community mental health services. Proposition 1, so the one that passed in March of 2024, passed by a reasonably narrow margin, and was really put forward as a strategy by the state to address a few challenges. Homelessness, particularly chronic homelessness, limited access to treatment and care, and insufficient housing for people with behavioral health needs. So to put this in perspective, we just highlighted one stat here that about 2/3 of unhoused Californians have a behavioral health condition, yet only 19% receive treatment. That's a statewide statistic. Proposition 1 aims to change that by expanding housing and treatment capacity through a bond measure and by focusing behavioral health funding on those with the most significant needs, covering both mental health and substance use disorders. So that's an important distinction there, that there's an expansion to substance use disorders. Importantly, it doesn't change the amount of tax that's collected under the millionaire's tax. It's only on how those funds can be used and distributed. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, Proposition 1 is really kind of two parts. So the first part is AB 531, which helped to fund a bond measure, the behavioral health infrastructure bond, to support the development of treatment beds, supportive housing, and community facilities. The second part, SB 326, renamed the MHSA to BHSA, which is really just an asterisk. Because what it really did is much more fundamental in terms of updating the funding categories, the eligible populations, and the related oversight requirements. So today we're going to focus on BHSA and what the changes mean for Ventura County. Next slide, please. Before we do, we just wanted to kind of briefly mention that Ventura County has already taken steps to expand the capacity as it relates to behavioral health services. So through the Behavioral Health Continuum Infrastructure Program, which is the same program that the bond money is being distributed through, the county secured nearly 94 million for new facilities, including a 38-bed mental health rehab center in Camarillo and a 16-bed psychiatric health facility in Simi Valley. So these are just some of the investments that are helping to improve access to residential long-term. Next slide, please. Importantly, the services are just as critical as having a place to provide them. So BHSA, just kind of underscoring this major shift that's taken place. BHSA shifts the county behavioral health priorities from broader prevention and population health strategies, which had been funded under the Mental Health Services Act, or MHSA, for things like the Ventura Take Action campaign and others, towards serving individuals with the most severe behavioral health conditions. So that's a kind of stipulation within the legislation that I just showed you. Second, under MHSA, counties had kind of greater flexibility to support a pretty wide range of needs across the mental health spectrum. BHSA narrows that focus to those with the most significant needs, including individuals with substance use disorders. So it kind of both narrows it, but it also expands it because it's inclusive of substance use disorders. And it emphasizes housing as a core component of care. And finally, that last kind of box there, BHSA introduces stronger requirements for accountability, transparency, measurable outcomes across the county. So counties have to demonstrate progress on these fronts as part of their planning and reporting, where that funding really becomes at risk. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think, can we go back one for me? That's okay. Yeah, there's one slide in between there. I don't know, I think we're a little out of order. So this slide is really kind of intended to show that the counties really are working in partnership with one another across systems and actors in the system who are leading different parts of the continuum of care. So prevention and population health strategies are really shifting to the California Department of Public Health, who's developing its approach to behavioral health prevention. And BCBH and other county actors are going to really have to work actively with them. There's still kind of guidance pending from the state on that. They'll also be working more closely with managed care plans like Gold Coast and Kaiser, who are responsible for serving individuals with mild to moderate needs, as well as school partners who are being asked to do more by the state around behavioral health prevention and service delivery. There are also law enforcement partners, first responders, hospitals, and other stakeholders with whom the state is asking for more collaboration and for more grading of resources across the systems of care. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to flip back here. So we've talked about some of these elements already, but I just want to make a few things a little bit more explicit. The first is that there are new and major commitments to housing in BHSA that just weren't there before. There was certainly funding that was being used to support housing, but it wasn't in it wasn't in the Mental Health Services Act. It was from elsewhere. There's also a focused increase on substance use services, as I mentioned. And there's a sustained focus on youth under 25, but really with an orientation toward interventions and services and less so on the prevention side. There's also an emphasis on evidence-based and community-defined practices across the spectrum. And there's a focus on ensuring engagement from a wide array of stakeholders as part of a really active planning process. So given all of these shifts, there are some key local funding impacts for folks to be aware of. This includes an expected overall decrease in MHSA funding for some outpatient services and for prevention programs, as the state is required to direct more of those funds or prioritize the services and interventions for individuals with the most significant behavioral health needs. Next slide. So under the updated BHSA, and I think we've kind of said this a few times, the services will really focus on individuals with severe behavioral health condition, those who are homeless, justice involved, or at risk of institutionalization. This includes adults re-entering from jail or prison, youth in the child welfare system, and others facing significant challenges. Next slide, please. So starting in July of 2026, BHSA will really be divided into a few new categories. You can see that 10% on that upper, in my case, left-hand side, the purple bubble there, will go to the state for state administration, workforce, and prevention efforts. So that's where that California Department of Public Health prevention funding will go. There's also funding for workforce that's a part of that, not to CDPH, but elsewhere. 30%, so of the kind of so right off the top, the state is getting a little bit more money than it had under MHSA. Previously it was getting 5%, now it's getting 10%. So the total amount that's going to Ventura County decreases a little bit. And then within the money that will go to the county, 30% is required to go to housing interventions, which is again a whole new funding category at BHSA. 35% will go to full service partnerships or FSP, which are really the more intensive wraparound services for individuals with serious behavioral health needs. And 35% will go to the behavioral health services and supports, or BHSS. So if I can just spend an additional moment on the BHSS category, Michael's going to go into detail on all of these things, but I just want to say something on that, which is under BHSA, the majority of the BHSS funding will be for early intervention services. So 51% will need to go to early intervention services, which is different than the prevention and early intervention funding in the past. It has a lot of stipulations around it. But it'll also be needed to support other non-FSP type outpatient programs that were previously funded through MHSA, as well as associated capital, technology, and workforce needs that had been, again, funded by MHSA in the past. So I mentioned this really just to highlight that there's a lot being squeezed into a much smaller portion of the pie, and that pie is really that BHSS blue bucket in the upper right. Next slide, please. So as we plan for this transition, in the context of all of these changes, the county developed some questions to start to assess existing programs. These questions include, is it mandatory and does it align with BHSA priority populations? Is the program eligible for BHSA funding? Is the program Medi-Cal eligible? Does it address disparities and service gaps? Is there other funding available that might support the program or service? And critically, does it demonstrate measurable local impact? So these are just the criteria that the county is using to help prioritize investments moving forward. So I'm gonna turn it over to Michael. Michael's gonna have a few words and then we're gonna open it up for questions and comments through his facilitation.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Can you advance the slide, please? So I want to underscore that Ventura County Behavioral Health has done quite a bit to gather lots of data on what some of the needs and gaps are quantitatively. And so we're going to show you a little bit of that in very, abbreviated or abridged fashion. So there is some measurable data that illustrates some of the gaps and areas at this high level. As we said before, this is the presentation that is going to be part of our community town halls. And what we want to really prioritize is input from the community to actually help us understand what their priorities are, right? We know what the needs are for the most part, so we don't need to reiterate those over and over. We need to hear more about some of the solutions that people have in mind and what those priorities are that will really be the ones that make the most difference and are responsive to the needs that we have established already. Which puts us in the next slide, which is a list of the multiple sources of data that Ventura County's already looked at and has been, trying to use as it begins to formulate this integrated plan. Right, so the purpose of gathering input here is to shape an integrated plan that is truly A, integrated, B, responsive to community needs and reflects the priorities that come from the community. And the legwork ahead of this has looked at a lot of different data here to make sure that we understand where we're at. We have lots of different thermometers and lots of different indicators to tell us where we're doing a little bit better than the state and where we're doing not as well as the state, and maybe need to look at different possibilities. So next slide. So this one is a little bit, requires a little bit of a explanation. So what you're looking at here is on the left is a set of indicators or categories of goals, right? And the ones on the left are ones where we want to see improvements. That's why the arrow is going up, right? So all the ones on the left is where we want to see an increase, which would indicate improvement, right? And all of the indicators or categories on the right are ones where we want to see a decrease. A decrease would actually be improvement. Now, having said that, some of these categories have a little asterisk or star next to them. That indicates that these are statewide goals that every county, all 58 in the state, have to articulate goals around. So these are not optional whatsoever. So every county has to have a goal related to access to care. Every county has to have a goal related to homelessness and justice involvement, etc. Okay? The other categories are ones that are more optional. So Ventura County is going to be required to select at least one optional goal beyond what the 6 that the state mandates. You can do more than one, but we have to do at least one, right? So we're gonna talk, I'm gonna unpack just a little bit the 6 goals that are you have to do, and then look at some of the options that are available. These, in essence, are the state's report card for Ventura County and the other counties throughout the state, right? So it was mentioned earlier that there's an increase in transparency and in accountability and oversight, and part of that is having standardized measurements across every single county of how we determine whether or not behavioral health is doing its job. Next slide. So on the 6 areas that the state is mandating that we have to come up with goals for, the good news is at least 3 of those categories, Ventura County is doing markedly better than the state, right? So we're, on access to care, we look pretty good. We're getting the right health services to people and we're meeting the benchmarks that the state has set for us. And same thing on institutionalization, like keeping people out of institutions or minimizing their time in those institutions. Ventura County looks pretty good too. And on preventing kids from being removed from their homes or from schools. Those are looking pretty good as well. So from a data perspective, there's some definite strengths and assets that we can point to and we can say, okay, it doesn't mean we couldn't do better, but we are doing already better than the state average. In some cases, quite a bit more. And then the areas on the right are ones where Ventura County has some room to grow and is underperforming the state average. Right? And there are some clear gaps. So on homelessness, we could do better on linking housing and behavioral health support systems, which is actually one of the goals of BHSA. And we'll go into more detail on that one. So right now, the quantitative data there, Ventura County is underperforming, right? And on justice involvement, we could do better in terms of directing people to treatment instead of directly into the justice system. So that's another area where Ventura County shows objectively on the quantitative indicators that it's doing a little bit worse than the state average. And then untreated behavioral health conditions, here it's a little bit more nuanced. So what the indicator that we have, the improvement that needs to happen is how do we improve follow-up after someone ends up in an emergency room based on a mental health crisis, right? So that's the indicator in which we could do better. Now, a lot of this stuff, again, we have much more data we could share with you, but not today, from the community health needs assessment, which goes into detail on all of these and could be unpacked and disaggregated into much more nuanced findings. That's not our purpose today. We just wanted to give you a high level understanding of, we have some places where it's clear we need to improve, and we have some places where we can build on success. Next slide, please. Now, when it comes to the optional goal, again, we have to pick one. Again, on the left, we have some places where the data look pretty decent, right? Again, it doesn't mean we can't do better, but the overdose components, the prevention pieces, and the what they call engagement at work, which is being employed or missing work due to mental health problems, on those indicators, Ventura County is doing pretty well. But there are some opportunities for improvement around improving the care experience, especially making it much more culturally appropriate and responsive to people. We could improve on how people report their quality of life and how they feel about their mental health on a day-to-day basis. We could do better on some of the social connectivity indicators for youth, which is around, do I have a meaningful way in which I participate at school, and do I have a caring adult there at school that really is looking out for my interests and I feel safe going to? And we could improve a little bit on suicide prevention, reducing suicide deaths and the propensity for some to engage in self-harm. So these are examples of places where, we should be talking about innovation and solutions and priorities. Next slide. So we are trying to do all this to shape an integrated plan that, as Nick explained, would take us at least 3 years into the process, and will be in front of your board of supervisors in the late spring of 2026. Next slide. You can see from this timeline, and I'm not going to read it to you, that we are into this process, but we're not even halfway into it. There have been some stuff that has happened prior to this, and we're now at this place where we're engaging the community and helping understand what their priorities are and what they want to tell us about where to focus. And the next step would be to integrate that feedback into an integrated plan, and it will go through a couple drafts, and it will look at different ways to make sure that we are aligned and doing what we're supposed to be doing. And then the approval process starts in the spring. So there will be drafts that will be brought in front of people, and there will be time for it to be looked at in public bodies, including this one. And ultimately, it will need to be approved by your county board of supervisors before it goes to the state. So we share this to show that there is a process and there's still ample time to get your input in, and that's why we want to hear you. All right, next slide. So having explained a little bit about those measurable gaps and some areas for improvement, we're at the place which we feel is the most important part of this whole presentation today, which is hearing input from the community and hearing your priorities. Again, we want to hear your input. We want to hear your questions. but we really want to hear solutions that you have to offer and your priorities for improvement based on your understanding of how behavioral health, both mental health and substance use, affect the communities in which you live, work, and play. And we will use those priorities to kind of shape the integrated plan. Just as a quick review, and then we will go to the questions from the Behavioral Health Advisory Board. Next slide. So, as has been explained, the state under BHSA is being a little bit more prescriptive about how money is spent and how it is categorized. So we will be talking in more detail in a little bit about the BHSS, the Behavioral Health Services and Supports, which is about early intervention, treatment, and supports. We will be talking about full service programming, which is intensive wraparound services that integrate and provide whole person care for people in community-based settings, right? And the 30% of funding that will go towards housing interventions, which is for people with chronic and severe behavioral health needs, connecting them to housing solutions. All right. So I'm gonna pause there. And we can go now to, as the Behavioral Health Advisory Board, first, if there are any clarifying questions about what we've presented so far, love to hear them. And then after we have those clarifying questions, if we could then hear from you some of your input on, let's just start with the clarifying questions about BHSA. Let's just do that. Yeah.
Diane?
Thank you so much for letting us do this. My clarifying question, I just didn't get it clear. It seems like prevention and maybe services to the transitional age youth are getting cut in order to provide for the severely mentally ill. But it just seems if we don't serve them when they're younger, that we're gonna end up with more severely mentally ill. Do I misunderstand that, or is it just a factor of the numbers?
Okay, can you go way back to that continuum of care?
Yeah, really way back place.
Way back place.
Yeah.
So it's a great question. And it is one that has come up repeatedly, in some of our interactions as we talk to people in the community, and for good reasons. Keep going.
Page 7.
So first off, by passing Proposition 1, which the voters did, they prioritized housing, right? And so housing now is a new piece of what the Behavioral Health Department is engaged in doing, particularly housing interventions for people with chronic and severe behavioral health. So because that comes in, right, and it's 30% of the funding, it dislodges some of the existing status quo. And the thing that it most obviously touches is what we traditionally used to call prevention and early intervention programs and outpatient stuff in the community, and a lot of the prevention work of like stigma reduction and general education and those kinds of things. And it also, you heard quite, extensively, there's a much more of a focus on those people with more severe and disabling behavioral health conditions. So the question is, who's picking up the slack since the county behavioral health department is doing less of that? Well, the answer is, in that second category, the managed care plans or the managed care organizations are supposed to be doing a lot more in the mild to moderate piece. And what you don't see as much right here, but it is also true, is the school districts and the County Office of Education have gotten additional sustainable sources of funding under the Child and Youth Behavioral Health Initiatives, or CYBHI, to also focus on mild to moderate pieces and get additional reimbursement for those. So it's not that it's going away in its entirety, it's being pushed to different parts of the continuum so that the county can focus on number 3 a lot more. Okay, so, but it is a redefinition for a lot of people, and it will, like any other change, it's disruptive and it's uncomfortable, and it requires some clarity and some, pivoting of people to adjust to the new system. And to understand where they can and can't do what they already do, or if they want to shift some of what they do to function in the new reality.
No, but I appreciate the answer because it is what I get asked probably the most too, so thank you.
All right, Chris.
Thank you, Michael, thank you for your presentation. I just want to make sure to get clarification on one particular part, as you mentioned, 51% of funding earmarked for early intervention. Though, as I understand, and this is where I want to correct, make sure to clarify on this, that it's 51% of the 35% of BHSS.
Correct.
Okay, and of that, guidance calls for that to be used on individuals who are 25 years of age or younger.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're reading it exactly right.
Any other clarifying? Yeah, Michael. Sylvia?
On the suicide prevention, reducing suicide deaths in South Park, you said that was a goal for Ventura County. But then on the first page, you said that would be under CPHB. And SUS, substance use services. I was just confused about that, where that actually goes. If that's a BHSA or if that goes underneath.
It is a little bit confusing. So some of the youth suicide prevention work has shifted to the Department of Public Health. Okay? But the indicator of suicide prevention writ large and the propensity towards self-harm is one of the indicators under BHSA. So Ventura County has a role to play in preventing suicides and, and we're gonna be held accountable for that indicator, but much of the actual programming for it is going through public health.
That will still be
Yes.
responsible for it, but it'll go underneath another.
Correct, we're still responsible, but we don't get the money for it. That's a short answer.
Yes.
Okay, Michael and then Chris.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. So we have prevention services being moved over to public health. What's that funding look like that's being moved from behavioral health over to public health?
This is a piece where I'm least able to answer in a satisfactory way. So we have been waiting for more detailed guidance on what exactly the California Department of Public Health is going to do with these funds and how they're gonna use the funds or disperse the funds. We simply don't know yet exactly what that looks like. What we do know is population level prevention work is no longer under the purview of county behavioral health departments.
And I will just add, I have regular conversations with our public health director, Rigo Vargas, as recently as this morning, who still has not received any guidance from CDPH. They're set to release more information this fall, but we don't know anything definitive if the counties are even gonna receive these dollars. 'Cause at this point, they're earmarked for state level.
Back to the youth suicide prevention, it's illustrative. There were grants in the previous couple of years. 10 counties received monies that were dedicated towards looking at youth suicide prevention in particular, but suicide prevention and reduction of self-harm more generally. And those 10 counties were asked to do a lot more collaboration between the behavioral health department and the public health department and sharing the data for precisely this reason, to try and showcase examples where the two departments could collaborate together. So there is that to draw upon, and California Department of Public Health administered those grants, so they have that information.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, that's it.
Can you talk about the housing? Is it like the completely free of charge? And then it is for how long people are supposed to stay there? Then what after that, where do they go?
So we are going to, after these clarifying things, go into like more detail on these three categories, and the housing one in particular, we could start there because it is the newest one and it has a lot of nuance. The short answer to your question is there's a lot of different kinds of housing that are being talked about. But mostly it's trying to provide affordable housing options, some of which are bridge and transitional, and some of them are more permanent and long-term for people that have these chronic behavioral health conditions.
Chris?
My comment is connected back to the question from Mr. Garcia and response from Dr. Dennering, where I'm reading in the guidance that 4% of BHSA funding is to go to CDPH, California Department of Public Health, statewide. So hence back to your comment in regards to counties being able to acquire those funds, it's 4% at the statewide level.
So presumably, you know, in the past, when things like this have happened, they have dispersed some of the funds from the state to counties, but we don't know exactly how that's going to play out.
John?
In talking about crisis services, you mentioned a new 30-bed lock unit out on Lewis Road, and a 16-bed in Simi Valley. Are those for adults only, or adolescents, or both?
Adults.
I think those are adults.
Yeah, adults,
All adults.
yes.
So do we have any expansion discussion for adolescents in this county?
We're always open to adding this. We do have a current in-county provider in Vista Del Mar that has licensed vets for youth.
So has their LPS designation been resumed and they handle the lock kids?
So, yeah, we can definitely have a longer conversation about that, but yes, they are under a monitoring agreement and they have received their designation as of earlier this year for a limited number of involuntary clients.
Great, thank you.
Andre?
Thanks. Under page 15, where you list the statewide goals for improvement, and it's noted that 6 have been chosen already, and 1 is to be chosen by the county. What's the process that goes to that choice, and does this board have any say in that?
Great question. I love that. So one of the things that we are doing in our town halls is we are talking about this issue, and we do have a survey, and you hopefully will take this survey today that gives you a chance to weigh in on some of these optional goals by proxy. But ultimately, this board is advisory in nature, so your job is to provide advice and recommendation of where you think the optional goal ought to be. So you're absolutely within your rights to like express, like, we think that these 2 are the most important and you ought to consider them. And then that will be used. You know, the fancy word for this is we triangulate data. So we have data from a lot of different places. We have some, you know, quantitative measures. We're doing all kinds of interviews and focus groups in the community. We have these town halls. We mentioned InReach. That's just basically using existing forums where people already come together and presenting to them on a discrete issue. So like, for instance, we're going to be talking to a meeting of city managers, you know, so a group of job-alike people that about some of these issues as another way to gather input. So lots of different pieces will go into this, but the BHAB is definitely a formal advisory body and can and should recommend where it thinks the optional goal ought to be.
Any other clarifying before we get into the specifics of the 3 major issues? And you can, if you think of other clarifying while we're doing that, it's perfectly okay to ask, because we do want to cover as much as we can. I did have one quick question when you were talking about the partnership to meet the engaged needs. So it looks like there's going to be more expectation, this is my question. Is there supposed to be more expectation now from our community partners to pick up some of what behavioral health has done with the mild to moderate in the past, and maybe other issues also, given that the mandate is so oriented towards the severely impacted?
Yes, I mean, when it comes to social policy generally, you know, I think every single social issue I've been involved in, of which this is a big one, right? One of the things that gets brought up is the fact that we are too siloed in our thinking, right? And that agencies and programs don't always talk and communicate well with each other, let alone collaborate, right? So this is putting a premium on more sharing of information, of more cross referrals, of more transparency of data, of more clear understanding about who's doing what and why, of like, you know, thinking about creative ways to brain funding streams when possible, so that they can be used from different agencies or programs to achieve common purpose. And that's not easy work, right? That's really difficult and hard to sustain. If it was so easy, it would have happened already. So it is gonna put a premium on that kind of partnership and collaboration, maybe more so than it ever has. And, I will editorialize just a little bit, there's a lot of confusion out there about who do I go to for what? And people I've talked to in Ventura County already, repeatedly, people have been confused about when they go to the county versus managed care versus the schools versus somewhere else. Right? And it's understandable, we have a really complex fragmented system.
But that's not just this county.
No, it's not just this county.
Okay, well, oh, sorry, Jenny.
Hey everyone, good afternoon, Genevieve Larzaro, sorry for running late. Yeah, as community-based organizations, we're being encouraged to become medical providers to bridge that gap before current contract holders. And just depending on the size of the organization, it's plausible for some and not so plausible for others. For my co, we became a medical provider for doula services at the beginning of the year, and it's a process. So just depending on how big the community-based organization is. Because my understanding that it's Beacon, right, or behavioral health services, from Almar. They're called Carolina now, okay, yeah, so. Yeah, so the CBOs are being, I wouldn't say pushed, strongly encouraged to become medical providers.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move along then.
Are we giving questions now?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Are there any clarifying questions from the public? Before we move on into more specific areas. I'm not seeing any.
There's one right here.
Thank you for your presentation.
You come up
You'll
here,
have to come up to
you
the
come up
mic.
to the mic so that the people on Zoom can hear you and it's just better.
Sue's up there. Do you have anybody?
Thank you for your presentation. My question is in terms of, I know you mentioned some of the ways that you are gathering data. But is there any one-on-one with, how do you reach the families like the end users of these services? Because, I appreciate so much the work of this committee. But at the end, we have so much to provide in terms of what we truly need. So how are you gathering that data person to person?
Okay, so again, these are excellent questions. I will say, first off, the county has already done a really comprehensive community health needs assessment process that surveyed lots and lots of people throughout the county and did lots and lots of in-person focus groups with individuals and family members, etc. So we have like an inch and a half thick report actually of data that, precedes HMA coming into this process and that we are utilizing and drawing upon, and so is the county. That said, right, we're now asking people less about like, what do they need? And it's more about what do you want? And what do you want within the constraints of what's possible? And so as we've been going out, for instance, and talking to some of the organizations that serve people, we have been really publicizing these community town halls. Again, the first of which is tomorrow online. And then we have one September 25th in Santa Paula. And then we have some in kind of early October, I want to say 7th and 8th of October in both Simi Valley and in Oxnard. We've been encouraging all the organizations that we talk to throughout this process to send your constituents our way. Come to the meetings, right? If something is really important to your community or to the people that you serve, get them to those meetings. Because that is the public way in which we're gathering this data, and they will have a voice. They will be able to like say, this is what is really meaningful to me in my particular community, or based on what I've seen in my own personal experience, etc. So we've done some already. There's more in front of us and lots of opportunities. We would love these town halls to be full. We don't want to show up and talk to 20 people. We want to talk to 100 people, So if you can help us in that respect, and you know, everyone here has a network of people and publicize these opportunities by all means, and you know.
Yes, and there are flyers in the back table, we came in, tell us about where to go for those. And I think we all have these, and I'm sure you pick one up so you can let people know. Okay, moving along to your first.
Okay, so why don't we go to the slide that is on housing? We only have just a time check, Chair. We're at, by my clock, we're at almost at like 53 minutes into a 60-minute presentation.
Yeah.
So,
We're gonna go over, it's okay.
okay,
Yeah.
so let's advance a little bit. I think housing might be a good one to go to since it was brought up and it's the newest one, so keep going. So keep going. There. One back. There we go. Okay, so specifics on housing, right? So 50% of the funds are to be used for people who are chronically homeless, right? Especially people who are living in encampments. So that's pretty straightforward. Up to 25% of the money within this category can be used for capital development, meaning building actual housing. This money is not for just anyone who's homeless, it's for people, individuals who have a serious behavioral health need, meaning serious mental illness, sometimes called SMI, or serious and disabling substance use disorder. Sometimes we have people that have both. In fact, there's a high percentage that have both. We call that co-occurring disorder, right? So you can see on the right side, all the different types of things that are allowable under this Behavioral Health Services Act. So this applies to the entire state. Some of these are going to be more relevant to Ventura County and some of them aren't, right? But there's a lot of options from which to choose. That's the issue. So part of the task that is happening here, both as part of our community planning process and in some other work that we're doing with Ventura County, is to figure out how do we shrink this list a little bit to like, what are the things that are really most actionable and high leverage in Ventura County, right? And I can't tell you what those are off the top of my head because I don't know yet, right? So it could be, for example, that we do more supportive housing and more congregate shelters in Ventura County than we might do in another county, right? It's possible that like we do more around recovery and sober living in this county than other counties end up doing. That's part of the work, is to figure out where are the places that it makes the most sense to put more of our energy in a strategic way, knowing that every time you make a strategic choice, it's a trade-off, right? But some of these are going to be more relevant and necessary and responsive to Ventura County, and that's our job, is to figure that out in conjunction with staff at the Behavioral Health Department, with community input and with multiple places to touch base with the community and with the housing providers. So we are reaching out to the housing providers and to the continuum of care, which coordinates a lot of this work, to make sure that we get it right for the plan.
On your list, you have unlicensed board and care. That terrifies me. I mean, if they're unlicensed, and I mean, the house behind me literally has been gutted by a non-licensed contractor. We had to call the police up, Stockford, and incorporated Ventura County. It is for senior those, but you know, exactly this is what they're building it for. And that just terrifies me because these were unlicensed contractors. The place wasn't engineered. If we would have happened to hear them working in the middle of the night, call on it, it might have opened.
I'm not an expert on this one, but I think what's meant here is, you know, the process for getting a license for a board and care facility might be taking so long that it prevents a barrier from addressing the housing need. So they expedite or streamline the process so that a board and care can be established. It doesn't pertain to the licensing of the construction itself. That's a different issue about licensed contractors building, but this is about the licensure of the board and care facility as a housing option.
Right, I just feel like if it's not licensed in that way, something else could, if it slipped through the cracks to that point, like get a certificate of occupancy somehow, it terrified me to have this happen a block away from me.
So I'm worried about, if we could get rid of one, we got that figure going. Go ahead.
So so one more slide advance. So what we do know on the housing piece, which might inform some of your priorities, right? Is we know where housing has been more of a challenge. So what our data has shown is that BIPOC individuals, that's Black, Indigenous, and people of color, right? Are more likely to report that they have unmet housing needs compared to white individuals. We also know that people with unstable housing are much more likely to report unmet needs about getting substance use treatment. And we also know that if you have unstable housing, you're more likely to think about suicide and to attempt suicide. Right? So this is why housing is in part, a big part of BHSA, is that housing does correlate with some of these really serious things. The other thing on the right side you'll see here is this is data just from Ventura County. So when we surveyed residents of Ventura County, this is what they said were their most reported barriers, right? It's not gonna be a shocker that number one at 63% was cost and affordability. The wait list was also pretty high, almost half, 48%. Couldn't find available housing, 39. Didn't meet the eligibility requirements, which are mostly income-based, 32. Didn't know where to find resources, 32. So we're pretty clear on what the barriers are. And we also know, why people were, what the barriers that people face in getting access to mental health and substance use treatment. They're listed there in order of priority. So we know that as we construct these solutions, we need to be able to change these numbers. So having said all that, I would love to hear from the Behavioral Health Advisory Board of what are some of the things that you'd like to see happen around providing housing interventions for those with more severe behavioral health needs.
Sylvia?
I know for, in my experience with my loved one, a lot of it was, these foreign cares that the county does pay for, but a lot of them end up having a lot of, drug use in them. And so, people just leave because they don't want to be around that, or you have 6 men in one bedroom and they're collecting, if they do move from the county to paying for it, then it gets moved, they're paying pretty much all their social security. So then you have somebody collecting, I think, $1,100 for 6 people, 4 people, 6 people in one room. And so a lot of homeless people just say, I'd rather be homeless than room with 6 other men. And so it's just not very, I don't think that that's a very good solution. And I do think the tiny homes that have at least some private, I mean, just for us, everybody, and I was in the military, so I can speak about this, but we just want 4 walls and a cot. That's like what basically every human being wants. And a lot of the answers is like, well, we'll have these shelters, and it's better than nothing, or that that's what they should just accept. And the reality is, oh, and I'm speaking more for men, I don't, I'm sure for it's families and women too, but they don't want to share a room with 4 other strangers. And then you have, mental health illnesses on top of that. So I hope that we do go to more solutions that are more like tiny homes, or at least these sleeping cabins. And I think that you would actually get people off the streets and into more permanent housing that way. Because it would be a bridge, right? But if you try to get somebody and say, okay, we provide you shelter, then they're just gonna be going back to the street. And I think that maybe Sergeant Dyer can speak more to that, trying to get homeless people into shelters and stuff, but yeah, so that's my.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can speak a little on it. It's difficult, you know, everyone's got their own situation, everyone's got their own story. It's all unique. We can't put homeless people in. Each of the homeless, well, I'll tell you what, every single homeless person has some sort of story. They have a great story usually, and they all got there through different means, whether it's domestic violence, substance abuse, mental illness. A lot of times it's all three, but yeah, I don't just, I need to comment to you because we've known each other for a little while now. I was really excited to see you on board when I got here.
Thank you. Ellie?
I wanted to say that maybe we can create jobs for them and they earn those housing. But those housing needs construction, they need gardening, then they need a lot of things. And, you know, based on the capability of people, they can, you know, work and, you know, earn those housing. And it's not completely free that they say, okay, can't do anything and they don't appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
I would say in regards to housing interventions, that a first priority would be that we have a roof over the head. And closely behind that would be that there's an integration of the full spectrum of supports that are able to support folks with co-occurring disorders. Which speaks to what it is that you mentioned about how it is that these efforts cause us to think about integration amongst agencies and community-based organizations, of which we have so many in Ventura County that are children and family serving. So I would say that put those priorities closely together would be an approach I would recommend.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, I echo that we need to, a robust network of supportive services, with housing. So going along with the housing first models is, transitional housing. We have too many folks who are being discharged from our intensive psychiatric units. We also have too many people being transitioned from our jails, and they go from lock placement to the streets. And it's, you know, there's some housing there, but it's very limited. And we end up with these bottlenecks, and these bottlenecks just overflow onto the streets. So a big part of it is transitional housing with robust services that are available but not mandated. Start mandating services, forcing people, particularly for taking unhoused people into housing. We have to regulate their sleep patterns before we can to increase the likelihood of them being receptive to services.
Matt?
Thanks, Cheryl, and thank you for that presentation. And I agree with what everybody said so far, particularly about the need to build out the whole continuum of housing, shelter, the transitional permanent. But I think a big issue, which is so many of the people in our community who remain unhoused have serious mental illness, and the issue is not the housing per se, but convincing them to go into the housing initially. I think once we get them there, there's such a great chance of making great progress. If there's anything being done or considered about that first stage of actually convincing them to accept our help, because to me, that's really the bottleneck, is that they have such serious mental illness. I'm dealing with people in my office right now. I have 4 or 5 cases where we're trying. These people are clearly mentally ill, some of them have kids. They're living in their cars. We're offering them housing. They won't accept it. And they have that free will. They're adults. But to me, that's the real issue which we need to be focused on, is how do we convince people, especially those with real mental illness, to come into the fold, to start this program.
Yeah, I mean, the two pieces I've heard the most is that convincing people, and also what was mentioned earlier is a lot of people with behavioral health conditions, not all, but many do end up in jail at one point. And then there's a real opportunity at that transition point to do something, but it has to be timely and it has to be the right fit, right? And that's a good leverage point or inflection point for making a difference.
And that's a way, I mean, like coming out of jail, coming out of an IPU, coming out of some kind of. Yeah, I think those two are the clear examples of where we can maybe catch people before they get back to the streets.
Right.
But there's still a lot of people on the streets. What are we doing at that level? I don't know what kind of funding. I guess that's not housing per se. But I think it's a critical, if we want this housing we're building to fill up. We're gonna need to do a lot of outreach and convincing of the street level food.
Sure.
Other comment, yeah, Jimmy.
I think just one component that just for us to really think about and underscore is also. Just whoever we're working with or contracting with, 'cause again, as a contractor, you know, for my company, we are required to have like a cultural competency and language access plan. And just making sure that whoever we are working with also has one, that's also being vetted by the department. So that if we have someone that speaks a language other than English, that they are ready and able to receive. I don't wanna get into details, but prior to COVID, we had someone who was a monolingual recycle speaker, schizophrenic. He was willing to, you know, he was unhoused, he was willing to receive services, and unfortunately. The entity we were gonna refer him to had no one on staff that spoke Mixteco, much less Spanish, and so we lost that window. We were housing him in collaboration with behavioral health for 3 weeks, and then we lost him. He ran off, we had to call the crisis line, police department showed up. The uniform scared him off and we lost him. He showed up around COVID back to our office and we couldn't serve him because he refused to wear a mask. And so again, we also have those opportunities, those really small windows to serve folks where they do want services. But if we can't catch them in language, that is a missed opportunity. And so I think if you're asking me personally for priority for me is language access and language support. For whoever we contract out for these housing supportive services. Thank you.
So great, anybody else on what you would recommend that we might need? I think, just following a little bit on Matt's, comment, and we have sort of the same experience in working with some of these individuals from a government, you know, elected position. Often we could find people, and this goes a little bit with what Genevieve was saying too, that, oh, okay, finally they're ready. You know, there's an outreach worker made contact, or maybe it's an officer, whoever. They're ready to be housed, they wanna go, but they wanna go now. And the problem is, well, you can come in a week and make an appointment with the whatever department and go to, and it just doesn't work, because then you lose, like Genevieve's saying, you lose a lot of people that way, I think. So I guess some kind of immediate kind of housing that's available, maybe it's just, I mean, I know in Santa Barbara for substance abuse, for example, they do like 3 rooms, they always save just for that, so the officers can, you know, go to that, so maybe something like that, that's more mental health oriented. Might be helpful.
Yes, more than a few counties have been moving in that direction. Yes.
Anything else on this topic, and we'll move to the next one. Okay, well, this is not your only, oh, I am so sorry, yes. I am so sorry, thank you. Okay, go ahead, come on up. Come on, if you don't mind.
Good afternoon, my name is Claudia Bautista, I'm a public defender here for Ventura County. And thank you very much for the presentation, and I really appreciate the invitation, both by our director and by Ms. Liddell to come and speak. And I don't want to take for granted that we're learning a lot of lessons through AOT and CareCorps. And our office in particular, is learning a lot of lessons on how to bring people who are treatment resistant, who have severe substance use disorder, who have severe mental illness, and how to actually convince them, how to entice them, how to persuade them, how to really make them want to leave their van or leave their cart that's been under the bridge forever, and what they know. And maybe talking to those individuals, talking to our care lawyer, talking to those who participate in our office, how to speak with them. You're utilizing a lot of trusted individuals, and sometimes those trusted individuals don't necessarily come from what traditionally we would think as trusted individuals. And sometimes we think that the trusted individual is a family member. And oftentimes that's not the answer. We have seen that trusted individuals come in a lot of forms, and sometimes it's law enforcement. Sometimes it's the person that they have seen care for them time and time again as they've cycled through the criminal justice system. And sometimes it is the public defender who they've seen as they have come through the criminal legal system. So kind of not neglecting those, and one of the lessons that we're seeing over and over through our new Prop 47 grant is peer navigators. People with lived experience, and I know that this board is always one of the strong suits is to talk about persons who with lived experience, and that it may be someone with a lived experience who isn't a family member that can assist with the persuasion of maybe it's time to get them into housing, that it's time to connect with them. And what we have found is oftentimes the best places before they're released from custody and starting that investment and that communication early and often. It isn't, I talked to them once and they just sat down. And we're learning through our grant, through CARE, through AOT, through all of these other programs that we've been trying, is that it really takes a lot of time and a lot of investment. And sometimes the best people are your peer navigators, not your doctors, not law enforcement, not what I tend to see now, not your high dollar individuals, right? And so we've invested in those peer navigators. So I certainly offer our program managers who we have an excellent manager who has lived experience and who is leading our efforts in our community service coordination and linking them through CARE and AOT. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to those. And I think it goes towards piercing those silos. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Britannia.
Thank you. In this continuum of care that we have here, yes, there are gaps in housing, of course, but it's good that we're building these block MHRCs and so on using BHAB funds and the top units and so on and so forth. But again, what happens when someone moves out of these mental health HRCs? So, an example for Casa Esperanza is one of our shining examples. Used to be of a place where our clients with our loved ones could go to. But again, when they graduate from there in 12 months or maximum 18 months, this social rehab program, where would they go? And so there is this group of clients that needs supportive housing, good. But there is also a group of clients who need something in between, which is the boarded care that Sylvia was talking about and so on. So this is a gap that is traditionally been hard to fill in the past. The county has done a great job of taking over the former Thompson Place Board and Care, for example, and that's a turning point to run. That's one example. I believe there's one more board and care in Ventura that is in the process of changing ownership of being sold, and we want to be careful we don't lose that. These are small numbers, though. I think we have only a couple of hundred beds, if that, in the county, and yet we're talking about large numbers that need the assistance. So I would encourage us to look at these supportive housing, sure, tiny homes in any fashion, but then not everybody's capable of cooking their own meals and cleaning their own place, for example. That's where these board and cares come in. So I want to encourage us to think about those things. Thanks.
Thank you, good comments. Yes, Soledad.
Yo creo que algo muy importante que también se tendría que tomar en cuenta.
And there's something important that we have to acknowledge.
Es el educar a la comunidad, puesto que las personas que estamos en la comunidad nos veníamos en diferentes puntos de la ciudad o de otros lugares y encontramos personas, decía ella, debajo del puente o en las tiendas fuera, que realmente vemos que tienen la necesidad de recibir esa ayuda y que no la pueden encontrar. Como comunidad, muchas veces queremos ayudarlos, pero no sabemos cómo.
I think we need to educate our community. There are different people that really need those services. Like one of my partners was saying, we actually found people on the bridges where they live and they need those services. How can we communicate this to the community so they can help them out as well?
Muchas veces encontramos personas que están pasando por situaciones de salud mental y me ha tocado ver que las personas en vez de ayudarlos nos quitamos como si estuvieran infectados de algo o en algunas agencias llegan y en vez de ayudarlos los sacan. No sé si hay lugares o instituciones que nos puedan ayudar a la comunidad a aprender más sobre a dónde dirigir a esas personas o llevarlos hacia la persona para que nos puedan ayudar.
Yeah, I've seen that there's some people that struggle with mental health, and they're pretty severe, and sometimes they try to seek the help, but then when they go to maybe like an institution, they treat them like if they were like some kind of infect people. Like sometimes they rather let them out and not even receive the help. My question again is how can we maybe find a program or maybe like a community that can help them out as well?
So can I ask the question just to clarify as to her? So is she talking maybe about cultural competency, which I think has been mentioned before, that when we're asking about these programs and trying to develop them, that we make sure that there is a cultural competency of language involved with the.
Más que nada es que entienda la comunidad cómo podemos ayudar a esas personas que están fuera y que necesitan ayuda, porque no conocemos, y me incluyo, más de cómo poder ayudarlos o más de lo que es salud mental.
It's more of the community, how can we know how to help them out? And I'm one of those people that sometimes we don't know what time to go and for them to receive help.
So it's really communicating with the community. And as we look at these different models of the things we're gonna recommend, we wanna make sure that we are asking the community, but also we are translating back to them where they can find out that they need in the housing, in particular the housing. So, do we capture that? Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see any other comments on housing. I know we need to move along, right? So the next topic.
Yeah, let's go to the behavioral health services and support.
Let's go to the behavioral health services and supports piece, the BHSS. So go back a couple slides here. Stop. There we go. All right. So this category is not so intuitively obvious, right? So this is again about early intervention programs that prevent mental health and substance use disorder from becoming more severe and disabling. So the assumption here is that there's already a behavioral health condition and now we're trying to arrest it or stop it from getting worse, right? And there's priority here for intervening with youth, which is defined by the state as 25 and younger. So youth would go into kind of these young adults, and it includes the transition age. Those are youth that were in the foster care system and now, are above 18, but still, in a vulnerable kind of position. And in this bucket or category, right, there are certain kinds of pieces that are required, right, that are listed there. Like there's some stuff there about says coordinated specialty care for first episode of psychosis. So again, we're not talking about a mild behavioral health issue. We're talking about issues that are becoming much, much more severe. And there's also an emphasis here on addressing some of the disparities and gaps that exist, right? There are some communities that, disproportionately are affected by these kinds of issues. And then you see on the right, some of the priorities here. So a lot on kind of addressing childhood trauma early, hence the emphasis on 0 to 25, right? Trying to
quickly figure out who needs these additional services because they're headed down a trajectory that is likely to get worse. And this requires a lot of coordination with kind of community-based organizations and schools and others to identify people that seem to be on that kind of trajectory, right? Again, lots of pieces here about advancing equity, reducing disparities, addressing individuals that are at risk of high risk of crisis. So what do we know about this already? Go to the next slide with a little bit of data. So what our data for Ventura County has shown us is that the LGBTQ community is especially at high risk of suicide. That is a group that, the stats bear out that there's an elevated risk of suicide ideation and attempt. Right? We also know that if you identify as being non-binary, you're also much more likely to have to say that you have unmet mental health service needs. And then you see there that transitional age youth group I was talking about. So the 16 to 25 have a much higher rate of suicidal thoughts and attempts. Right? So these are some populations that we can proactively know that there's already a high propensity for some of these things to get more severe. So to the extent that we can, get better with our systems of early identification and referrals and cross referrals, we will be better off. And then we listed some of the barriers again, just to kind of reinforce what prevents people from getting the help that they need. And there's slight differences between mental health and substance use. And then we listed also here for the first time, you haven't seen this before, what people report as their biggest quote unquote life stressors. Right? So you see there what really stresses people out and pushes them. And this was from a while back. So these stats might change a little bit if we did the temperature right now. But just people said my overall mental health, I'm constantly stressed. Housing was really high. Children's mental health, like pushes people really towards the edge, and immigration status, which is probably likely to be higher under current conditions. So we would love to hear your priorities, your questions, your concerns, your solutions that you have for doing a better job of early identification under this PHSS care category and related kinds of issues. So.
Okay, suggestions, Chris?
Yes, representing the school perspective, I'd like to reference some of the results from the California Healthy Kids Survey, which is administered to a last administration, about 26,000 youth in Ventura County. During that time, high school age youngsters were about 10% of them reporting current alcohol and drug use. From that same group, roughly 25% were reporting social emotional distress. About 30% experienced chronic sadness and hopelessness, and 10% had considered suicide. Beginning with that, I want to mention that the Ventura County Office of Education has had incredible success working in partnership with VCBH over the course of the last 6 years in bringing programs and services into school-based settings to be able to provide trainings for both youth and adults, to provide screenings, to provide services, both individual and group-based services, to make community-based referrals, and ultimately to confirm linkage to services. On a 3-year average, I'm looking at data table in front of me that represents 1,514 confirmed linkages. And so I just want to reference that great success that education has had in partnership with VCBH in doing these kinds of early outreach and intervention.
Great. Other comments?
Again, it's pointed to education, but in the next level, the community college, health centers, there's often, really long wait times for them to be able to even get a telehealth meeting, much less sit face to face with someone. And I think, those are really vulnerable students. They're trying really hard to, improve their situations, working 2 jobs, sometimes sleeping in a car. And it just seems to me that, again, this is a place where they reach out for help, and there should be something available reasonably quickly when they're asking, so we don't lose them.
Anybody else? Comments? So,
I think this was also, be directed at Chris, from what little I know, it seems to me that a lot of times it starts in middle school, and a lot of these middle schools are just trying their best and trying to address the needs of the students that they can reach. And then the students that they can't, maybe an attitude is like, we'll just let the high schools deal with it. And I think if there was some type of connection to know some of those kids that that the high schools will be getting, and there's some preparation to know, like, okay, these are the students that we didn't reach or weren't able to help during middle school, and now they're gonna be entering your high school, so that there can be some counseling services or some notification to address those kids. Particularly when you're talking about kids that are in underserved populations. I think that would be helpful. I know that it says 16 to 25 is what the target is. But it would seem to me that, and maybe that's working with public health, to get them at that younger age when they're really starting to get more influences outside, like social media and stuff like that.
Just to clarify, the 16 to 25 is not the target. The target is 0 to 25. The 16 to 25 only pertains to transition age youth. Those are youth that are in the foster care system that are transitioning to adulthood and and there's some set aside funding and programs intended to help that population in particular. You're right in saying, we have a lot of data from the state, and California Healthy Kids Survey is a good one. It's not the only one, but it's a very good comprehensive one that shows that, a lot, on average, some of the lowest scores for social emotional kinds of issues are in 7th grade. It's a low point for a lot of people on average. So that middle school slump is real, right? And it is a kind of time in which, systems for early identification and referral are critically important, right? So I'm glad that you're lifting those up.
yes,
I could, to Sylvia's point, I recognize there's good work to be done in communicating, articulating youth from the middle school and the high school setting. I think I would also add to that, I think there's really good work to be done in coordination and care, not just within the school, but outside of school, for all the folks that are children and family serving. It's a good opportunity for us to communicate together about those that we serve.
And that's, I think, critical. I mean, I know we have privacy laws for and HIPAA for a reason, but I think there's got to be a way that these organizations can knit their information together. You hear what Kaiser's been able to do just, with medical care. If we could do that with behavioral health care within our county, I just think we could help in a much better way.
Andre.
It's just a back to Chris's, the data that Chris presented, with the realignment of funding towards a greater percentage or proportion be provided by healthcare providers, insurance. It would seem to me that that youth would not, that were in underserved or underinsured locations and zip codes would have now even fewer opportunities for mental health services through their healthcare provider, as opposed to those that have a Kaiser or a private insurance.
Just a point of clarification. So in the existing system, and this is not really part of the county per se, but just as a clarification about the continuum. So under existing state law and regulations, under the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, all students are eligible for what they call Tier 1 and Tier 2 mental health services at and through schools. That means it could be school-based or it could be school-linked, like a provider that works with the school. And insurance is not the barrier, because what changed in the system was previously was limited to those that were on Medi-Cal or Medicaid, right, you know? But the state changed its rules with managed care and said, every commercial provider, you gotta do this. So schools now have a vehicle for providing a lot more of those mild to moderate services at and through schools than ever before. What is required is that they get into a system called the fee schedule, where they submit claims that go to a third-party administrator, and it can be to a Kaiser or a Gold Coast. And, you know, any commercial insurance right now, virtually every kid is covered in our systems. And then that third-party administrator gets the money from the managed care people and brings it back to the school, who could then pay a provider. If the provider did it, will pay themselves if they had a school-based employee providing the service.
And I think that's important. I don't think that's not knowledge that is really out there in the way it should be, because I think the municipals have no idea about that, but also. You also have people there at the schools who are gonna provide the services, and that's a huge problem. I think the need is so much greater than what's available at the school or even reaching out. I mean, to find a child therapist, even privately in this county, is exceedingly difficult. So that's a real need that is really not being met.
Just again, to really clarify, schools are intended to do those universal things like screening, parent education, stigma reduction, and schools are empowered to do more in the mild to moderate support groups and individualized therapies, both with students and their families. But the specialized and more acute care and the higher level care is not what the schools have been set up to do. And that's where the relationship has to be really close with the county and with subcontracted providers that the county works with.
Right. And the CI with BHI, that was referenced, there was an article in the paper a couple of weeks ago that talked about it, and I'm sure Chris can expand on that. That this has been around since 2021, that the state put this out and changed the rules for schools to be able to bill through Medi-Cal regardless of insurance type or status. Like anything, there have been challenges with implementation. And so Chris, if you wanna weigh in on that article that just came out.
Yeah, I was, in that article that came out, interviewed with that at the start, and had some comments about our efforts, of which we're reflecting that we now have. Over half of the districts within our county are engaged in this work stream now that is called CYBHI, aimed at gaining revenue for those early services, tier 1 services, I call them, through the multi-payer fee schedule, which just about virtually every insurance is a payer. The one point that I wanted to add on to that, happy to share more on that topic at some point in time, because it's deep and robust. We've been working on it now for a couple of years. But wanted to add to Diane's point that we're managing through these efforts to scale that HIPAA-FERPA divide that has been so difficult and so challenging to integrate how it is that we deal with protected information in school spending, and then what that looks like within the medical model. So just wanted to let you know a little bit about that CYBHI effort in regards to the FERPA we are tackling.
Great. Michael?
And real brief. And the one thing I want to acknowledge is are the wellness centers at the schools, because a big part of it is just opening the door for folks to walk into and making them welcome. And one of the geniuses of the way they did these wellness centers is that they're each different at each different school site, and the students at those school sites design them. And this isn't like a silver bullet. This isn't something that just is a cure-all, but is like a step in the right direction. And then cumulatively, if we continue to make, one is to destigmatize behavioral health issues, and two, make it accessible, then we increase the likelihood that folks will get the treatment that's appropriate to their needs.
Thank you. Genevieve?
And just to add to the wellness centers, there's also the community schools initiative that some of the school districts have, where we can co-locate resources on some of the school campuses. So like in my school district, Rockstar Union, 2 of the high schools are home to the community schools initiative. So Wendy High School, Channel Islands High School, and again, that means resources are available, meaning community-based resources are available at these high school sites. Meaning they don't have to come to like a MyCop, for example. We're like housed at the school site. So another opportunity
So yes, the Community Schools Initiative is through the California Department of Education. There's 4 pillars, one of which is called Integrated Student Supports, which is mostly meant school-based and school-linked mental health services. And so it's part of the cake. It's baked into the cake from the get-go, and it was always envisioned that community schools would be, breaking down silos and doing more school-based and school-linked services to address family and student needs.
We have one public comment. Did you want to make a comment on this?
To Supervisor Matt's comment onto like what happens next and Claudia's partnership with communicators and Breton, what happens after this. I think one of the things that a really important partnership is the families. I think in communications, I think we're so key to the success of early prevention and continuing as well as maintaining the importance of some cultural importances to us. Like, for example, isolation of certain family members, to see that not as a, well, this is what we're going to do, but rather a symptom of mental illness. And that there are some families who are very willing to take care of our loved ones, but we also need that support system. And that can alleviate some of the support systems that we're looking to work on their homelessness and so on. But I want to emphasize so dearly and so critically the involvement of families as such a stepping stone to maintain that. And I understand also to Chris and understanding the limitations, and to Mr. Rodriguez as well, of HIPAA laws, but just as we communicate our community, we educate our communities. And so how to help also to educate or to rethink the positioning of mental health providers, to understand that there's a lot of ways in which we can still provide privacy, but involve our families. Because if we don't, that is such a critical step that I think we're missing to reintegrate not only our mental health, but our societies and our communities as a whole. We need to really emphasize that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to the third question. We do have to trying to get through this. And we still have the bylaws.
Okay, so on the last point that was made, I will say one of the through lines that's in BHSA, and you might have to dig a little bit deeper, and we didn't stress this in our presentation, but like one of the through lines in all of the funded categories is the involvement of families, right? So that has been lifted up a little bit more than it was in the past. And then the other one is the integration of substance use into the continuum. So those pieces cut across everything. So let's go to that third bucket. This is the full service partnership, or FSP. There we go, right there. That's good. So full service partnership programs have existed at the county level for a very long time. This is what the county has, knows a lot about and has a lot of infrastructure about. So what's intended here, and if you read the kind of guidelines, it's how do we take people that have a diagnosis, right? And how do we now provide them with the language in the guidelines says, whatever it takes so that they can be, productive members of our society, right? And so that means that we need wraparound supports. And we need a host of integrative services and supports that help those with these chronic and severe behavioral health needs to do well, right? So in the FSP, what's changed is, now we have to include SUD and co-occurring treatment, right? I'm not saying it wasn't happening before, but it has to be in there. And then it must be aligned with some high intensive service models. And those are listed there. I don't know all these acronyms. These are like specific types of therapy and programmatic approaches that have existed for quite some time. So it's basically saying that we need to align the full service programs with what we know has a track record of working, right? These are evidence-based approaches that have lots of, success behind them. And we should align ourselves with that. And then it calls out peer support. I want to make a special call out here, like it's been mentioned already, peer navigators and peer specialists are essential parts of the continuum, right? We simply don't have enough licensed professionals. And the licensed professionals can't always make the right kind of connection. I mean, what I've heard from talking to people with lived experience over and over again is that the peer support, that point of identification, and someone who's walked the walk and had to navigate our complex systems is key. So navigation and just a trusted ear is really essential in many cases, and that's now directly in what we're trying to do. And then we're required to coordinate, FSP also is required to coordinate with the primary care providers, the healthcare system. Right, so that, again, this is the piece that in some ways is the most straightforward, I will say, because this is a long-standing commitment on the part of county behavioral health to deliver FSP programs. There are some specific program requirements that we have to do, but like in the integrated plan, it will be, this is more a question, I would say, of refinement of an existing model as opposed to thinking about an entirely new approach. Next slide has a little bit of data. Right, so we have some data here of like, what are some really risky behaviors? The top one is drug and alcohol use, 88%, right? The top mental health and well-being issue was mental health problems. One of the higher reported ones was aging complications, right? So as I get older, you know, that exacerbates and complicates the types of services and needs that I require. And then we have some data there on suicide. So this is showing kind of 11% of people who responded to the community health needs assessment survey marked mental health and well-being as a serious issue for them. Now, there were fewer respondents over time because this survey has been used at different periods, right? So there's fewer people that are reporting serious thoughts. That's good, and attempts are down. But, you know, and here's the cautionary tale. We still have about 1 in 4 people who reported having suicidal thoughts who didn't know what to do about it, where to go. And then you see the life stressors here on the right again. And then on this survey and on the data that was collected, we have unmet behavioral needs by city. And you can see kind of the concentrations of where we have higher percentages of people reporting unmet behavioral health needs. Right, so the county is big and it's diverse in terms of all different kinds of, you know, vectors. You know, population, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, you know, age distributions, etc. So you can kind of see for yourself where some of the concentrations are on unmet behavioral health needs. So would welcome any input that you have on how to improve our ability to provide intensive wraparound services and supports for people that have those severe behavioral health conditions and have already received a diagnosis and are receiving treatment.
Okay. Any input on this, Chris?
Looking at the data in terms of unmet needs, I just want to call out that over half of the unmet needs are occurring within the Oxnard Plain. So that would seem to suggest that there's a focus in terms of concentration of efforts and services within that those particular regions of our county.
Andre?
I'd like to point out that these are complicated issues, and although I do appreciate the opportunity to comment, it's something that I just don't feel kind of prepared to do so without knowing, thinking this more through. So thank you anyway.
And it's a chance, I'm sorry, I'm gonna call you just a second, it's a chance for us to remind you that if you wanna go into more depth on any of these issues, you have the, where they're gonna be doing more, these, you're going to, those issues, the questions that you're doing now, they're gonna be going into much more detail if you go to any one of these additional, feedback or community issue forms, but good comment, Sylvia.
I guess, my question is, so you have suicide rates high with people with severe mental disorders, right? And that's one group of population. And then, you know, that's just trying to get them into, on medication or get them help that way. But we also, which I don't know the data on in Ventura County, but then you also have people that don't have severe mental health disorders that are committing suicide that would also be covered by behavioral health. So those would be two different populations, correct? And just speaking for the latter population, for me, I would really like to see in the county, some type of like ACE overcomers, program. I think that would be helpful. I tried looking for myself to see if we don't have anything like that here. Just to, you know, and in that program, you are with people that are also going, you know, going or had adverse childhood, experiences, thank you. But I think that that would be a really good program because people with these, they have a 32 more times, or to, increase in suicide, so. I don't know if that would be helpful, but yeah, it's just, those are just, my thoughts on. I'm not sure when you're saying high suicide rates, which populations you're talking about, or they're just together.
So the suicide question pertains to all, right, all of the different categories that we're talking about. The one we were talking about in FSP, these are people that already have a diagnosis, already receiving some treatment. And do receive, you know, some wraparound services to help them, but that doesn't mean they still don't struggle, right? And it doesn't mean that they also aren't at severe, you know, risk and propensity for some self-harm, which is what happens. To fill in the blanks, so in case anyone doesn't know, the Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACEs survey is a relatively short questionnaire. And, you know, there's 10 questions on it, and like, the more you answer, the greater there is a propensity for all kinds of pathological things that happen, right? And there's some tipping points, right? If you have 4 or more, you know, for instance, like going back to the children and youth thing, you're much less likely to graduate from high school. You're more likely to take up cigarettes and smoking, you're more likely to enter into the justice system, et cetera. And then the more of these things that you have in your background from your childhood, the greater the risk for all kinds of these things to occur. So there is emphasis in the BHSS, obviously, on early identification and prioritizing working with people who have, you know, ACEs to try and head it off the path, so to speak. And we can probably assume that much of the FSP population already has, we did pretty well on the test, right? But I think, I don't know if I answered your question correctly, but like, I think the suicide piece is present in all of these populations. It's present in our kind of early identification of people, it's present in the ones that are in our existing programs, and it's present in the types of housing interventions that we're trying to provide to people that are struggling.
Okay, I see one public speaker, Liz Warren, I think it is, right? Liz?
Thank you. Yes. I wanted very much to comment about the FSP portion of the CPP. To me, this is the gold standard. This is the most important part of what is being put in front of us as a community to provide input as we look at offering an integrated plan next year. This is something that I personally, as a client of VCBH for 23 years and a practicing mental health rehabilitation practitioner and certified peer support specialist, have a lot of lived experience with. And I truly believe that we cannot ever talk about wraparound services without including a discussion that involves peer support services. And I know that that has been discussed at today's meeting, but I really want to just drive home the point a little bit, because now that 3 years ago, the state came up through DHCS, gave Cal Mesa the responsibility of coming up with the certification of our profession. They now have 3 subspecialties. One that is a peer support specialist that works in crisis services, one that works in justice involved individuals, and one that works with individuals that are unhoused. So they're also looking at other ways to help generate additional revenue streams because all of this now can be billed back to Medi-Cal. And I really, really do believe that we have to look at a peer support specialist being an additional member of the treatment team if we're looking at the ACT model and the FACT model and some of the other things that are now required. And I know that VCBH already does that. I had the privilege of working on an ACT team many years ago. And the thing that I constantly want to advocate for is that when an individual gets linked into services with VCBH, whether they're coming out of an IPU discharge, whether they're coming out of an ER visit, whether they're coming for the very first time for services, that they have a peer support specialist attached to them from the very beginning. In other words, it shouldn't be like an afterthought. It should be something that here comes this new person and they have a peer support specialist who can help be there for them in the early stages, helping them navigate the process and getting them linked up and being with them if they have to accompany them to their first doctor's appointment or help them get that medication that they may need once they get a prescription but don't know how to do it or don't have transportation. And then there can be warm handoffs, but that person could always be a resource for that individual receiving VCBH services to call upon when they need them. An individual transitioning into independent living, stepping down to a lower level of care, they need someone to help them do that. And that was something that I was able to do for folks. And they should be attached to them and have a relationship with them and the property that they're living in so that we're setting people up for success and not failure. So I cannot ask or overemphasize enough how important I believe, and we've done this. I mean, I know that Dr. Dennering has instructed her senior staff, and we brought on more peer support specialists. But I think we need to double the amount of peer support specialists that we have, and that if we're looking at moving funding, and we're now mandated by the state, this is an area that we have to seriously consider because what this also does is augment the work that case managers are doing, and it will help to free up some of what case managers are doing, which they shouldn't necessarily be doing, and some of what law enforcement is doing that they shouldn't necessarily be doing. And I think that there's a wonderful opportunity here to kind of combine the best of what we have to offer. And there are a lot of us with lived experience that are trained in all of this that are anxiously waiting for future opportunities. And I think that we're not going to have an opportunity like this again to really look at the nuts and bolts of what's in front of us. And so I urge the members of the board to really look at this seriously and to understand what's being asked of the department. This is a heavy lift, and they really need everyone's help in order to design the best integrated plan possible. I look forward to participating in the town halls, and I urge all members to come out. You know, when I was a member of the board last year, there were town halls. Only 2 people showed up from the board when they were asking input for $20 million to spend on an MHRC. So I really think that you all need to show up.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we are almost out of time and we still have to do the bylaws. So I'm gonna have to, I think we understand your points, which are great. And you're right, we should all attend a community, one of the community events also, but thank you for your input. Okay, so if there's no other input, and I don't think there is, so, I know this was not, you wanted to still do something about a survey, right? I don't know that we have time.
So we have the surveys here, we'll put up the QR code, there's also hard copies in the back, but there's a QR code, it would make it easier for us, but like, well, either way, just before you leave today, you take the survey, hard copy, or do the QR code, and thank you so much for your generous allowing us to come out here and talk to you and be part of your agenda.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation on the work you're doing. It obviously is going to benefit all of us. You can see we have a lot of opinions and a lot to say. So you'll get a lot of input from us. So thank you, and thank you to the board for doing that. And we have to move to the bylaws before we lose the quorum. Michael.
Sure. Good afternoon, and thank you everyone's patience on hope we still have one bill. I was gonna go into more detail previously, but we're running short on time. The overarching goal of this round of bylaws was to make this more flexible. So every time we changed the standing committee, we didn't have to go back in front of the board of supervisors to provide revising entire bylaws. So some of the highlights is one is that bylaw standing committees are created by the BHAB. Two is that we set a minimum and a maximum amount of board membership, 15 the minimum, maximum 22. Two supervisors shall appoint 3, but maybe up to 4 representatives on the board. And then as well as eliminating the previous standing committees and working towards more of a working model. And I believe that's it. I did find when I was going through preparing today, a few typos. I think it's more because we merged a PDF document with Word. So I would invite a motion to approve the bylaws, but subject to the correction of any kind of clerical typo. And just.
I move approval of the new bylaws with just grammatical and spelling corrections.
One second, thank you for all the work on this. This was a very easy. Appreciate it.
Well, yes, it was a project of love.
It's a collaborative effort.
And there's only 3 of us left. 3 people dropped out, not because of that. It really was not bad. Are there any questions? There's been a motion, but I want to see if there's any other input or questions. I know we're rushing through this. There are bylaws. Of course, we can change them in the future if we need to, but we've made it simpler to do that. If anybody has any comments they want to make right now before the vote. Hey, thank you. Of course.
These bylaws, they're what we live by, but we are gonna have a set of ground rules. That's where the flexibility's in, so if there's something you feel is missing in here, let me know before we finish the ground rules, and those would be like procedures for how someone gets a certificate here, things like that, just basic stuff that don't belong in our bylaws.
Right. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Soledad?
Solamente quería, a mí me las mandaron en inglés, las tuve que traducir, entonces no pude ver si había algún error o no. Hasta ahorita ya no tuve tiempo, y me gustaría si me las mandan en español.
Were you asking if they're translated?
No, she was just saying that she would say the paperwork, but it wasn't translated.
Oh.
And it'll be better if, when they send her the paperwork, if it was translated.
Absolutely, and it has been translated, so I'm sorry if that didn't get to you, but we will get you that. Thank you. Michael, sorry. Anything else? Oh, your light's still on, so, okay, all right. If there aren't any other comments or questions, we'll have a vote on this for the passage of the bylaws with the corrections, the mechanical corrections to be corrected, the spelling errors and then.
Yes.
No, you're gonna.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's your job. I don't have, actually, that's me. So then, Baragon,
Yes.
is she abstaining?
I'm gonna say yes.
Abstaining,
Together.
okay. Danielle, Andrew Bobrow,
Yes.
Chris Dyer,
Yes.
yes, for me, Rebecca's not here. Chris Rich,
Yes.
Supervisor.
Yes.
Diane.
Yes.
John Senzel,
Yes.
Dahlia Rockton. Yes. Michael Rodriguez.
Yes.
And Sharon.
Yes. That motion passes. Thank you so much. These bylaws then will be forwarded on. I think the department's already signed off on them, so they will go directly to the board of supervisors through the department. So that
Oh, the love of that.
Yeah, and we expect Matt to have that thing. So, on here, under old business, I think we could even not have to do that, we can put it to the next meeting, but it's unless anybody has a question or a show up. On our last meeting, which is when Teresa Tomstack was here to talk about orientation. And that, all the meetings are recorded, so if you missed it, you can still get it. But I will say, in the back of the room, there is a binder, an orientation binder for every member. Some people took them, which they were supposed to do last time, but it wasn't clear, I think, so we brought them back. So if you did not get a binder, or you're a brand new member like Chris, be sure you take one there in the back of the room. And most of us have them, but if not, we want to make sure they're available to take your questions. And a new business, we are gonna set up an ad hoc committee on procedures, or the one that Diane's referring to. I'll just say, if you're interested in being on that committee, we can do it by Zoom because it is ad hoc. Please let me know. I have a couple members already who volunteered, so if that's something you're interested in helping us just set up some central procedures that we'll go by, that would be great. And if there are any future presentation requests, I know we had one at the executive committee that we'll be acting on. If there's anything else that anybody else wants to see a presentation on, and this discussion we had today, I think generated a lot of ideas and things that we might want to delve into a little bit more as a board. So please let me know if you have any of those. And I will go to contracts and public comments, but thanks everybody for all your input. This was terrific, I thought. Okay, any discussion on any of the contracts that are in your binder? I'm sorry, in your agenda package? Andre?
Yeah, I know we're under a little bit of time.
We're here.
On the second page of contracts, the medic staff and solutions. Is that like for standing providers and employees, or is that more locums?
It's what you would call a locum, so it's for folks who most likely will end up working for the department, but we need to get them in faster. We also use them to fill behind leave of absences when we have people who are out and we just need temporary staff.
God, thank you. My experience in the hospital is that tends to be significantly more than hiring somebody the traditional method, but I understand that there's a role.
There is, and we negotiate ours pretty comparable to what our regular staff, they make the same. And we negotiate pretty tough with the actual organization as far as not having to pay them too much money.
That's good to hear. And I did another comment. Is the next one over the no, not the $30, the Aspirin. I heard secondhand that the local school district also contracts with Aspirin. So is any of the money that the county pays Aspirin recovered in situations where there's services are provided by both?
No, like we talked about today, they're different populations. So some of the larger organizations have multiple agreements with us, even Aspirin has multiple different contracts with us that serve different populations. Some are fostering youth, some are non-fostering youth. For us, as specialty mental health providers, services, with the schools, I can't speak to exactly what they're billing for, but it's not specialty mental health because that comes through us. So you'd have to dig into their scope of work, but they're different scopes.
Thanks.
Anything else on contracts? And I did skip over the director's report, and I apologize.
That's okay. The director's report is here included. The only three things I was actually gonna mention are areas that we've talked about a lot today. One is a new FSP program that we're doing out in East County for youth and family that you can read more about here. The second is highlighting our overdose and prevention work, our staff were asked to present at a statewide conference last month and did an awesome presentation. It was super well received, and folks liked our videos and kind of our really proactive approach, which has really helped drive down our fatal overdose rates in our county. And then the last piece was about our critical care navigation services and our housing. We're coming up on a couple of years of our BHBH grant, and we hit our 100 client threshold. So we're very excited about that, and we'll be working to expand BHBH and all of our housing, obviously under the problem.
What about the funding for resolution?
For BHBH,
you got the funding originally for the big grant, and then I think there was another one that came in recently, since I last.
Oh, that was Home Key Plus, yes, so Home Key Plus was a grant that the county, executive office, our homeless solutions director's office, applied for, and we contributed to the grant. We'll also contribute BHSA dollars. It's 28 million, I believe we received, for some housing out on Lewis Road campus, so we're very excited about that too.
Any questions for Dr. Jenner? Sylvia?
It wasn't, there was best practices that you had, and, I tried looking on that. On the website for all the. What's it, EFB, the. Best practices that Big Connect is doing.
Oh, big EVP,
Yeah.
space practice.
Sorry, hold on. And then there was the one for early psychosis that was interesting. I tried looking at it and it was a lot of information, so I was just wondering down the line if we could get some more information or see what you guys were maybe looking at doing out of those ones.
Sure, so what Sylvia's referencing is BH Connect, which there's also a section in the director's report on. That is, we're still monitoring that and still developing what we're gonna opt into versus not. There's a lot of overlap in BH Connect with the evidence-based practices with Prop 1 also under the FSPs. And so a lot of the evidence-based practices will have to do as part of the FSPs under Prop 1. And so it's just a matter of determining if it makes sense to launch some of these sooner in an effort to get more technical assistance. But, you know, there always comes with a catch. There are fidelity measures and certain standards that you would have to meet in order to build through BH Connect. So there's a lot of kind of analysis happening right now to determine the early psychosis. I can say that that is something we will be doing, we're already doing through our VC prop program. That's pretty much like the gold standard type of program that they're looking at for early intervention and early psychosis. So that is one we will be doing because we're already.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Any other business we need to talk about? We have another public comment section. Is there anybody else who wants to make another public comment? Quite a few today, would be appreciated. No? Okay. I think the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for being here and for staying on time. I had a very busy meeting. We knew it would be, but we got through it. Excellent. Thank you.